A frustration I often hear from people desiring to be supportive of the transgender and non-binary community is the terms are always changing, or there are so many terms for identities, and I don't know which ones to use. And so, first, I want to say you're right. The terms have changed and continue to change. And you're right, there are various terms for identity. And so I want to acknowledge that frustration that you may feel if you're one of the people that think this way, because you are trying to be supportive. And then if you are corrected, you feel like you've done something wrong. And on top of that, if the person correcting you appears to be angry, you feel that way even more. And you feel frustrated that that's the opposite response that you were going for. You're trying to be supportive. You thought you were understanding. You thought you were doing the work, and you feel like you got it wrong. So, what I want to talk about today to help you out is to understand why the terms have changed, to understand why there are so many terms, and to let you know what you can do. So, one reason the terms have changed is because initially the terms used were given to the community by clinicians, by healthcare providers to indicate a problem for anyone who identified different than what they were assigned at birth. And we know that gender diversity is not a problem, that multiple gender identities is not a problem. It's a part of biology, it's a normal variation in humans. And so it makes sense that that term and those terms, kind of initially given by clinicians, were abandoned because they signify a problem and there is no problem. So as terms were beginning to try out and evolved, people began to realize what term best described a person's identity and what terms were often still using some concepts or assignment from others. And the terms have continued to evolve. In the last 10 years, I've seen terms come in and out of favor and sometimes back in again. And so it's something I spend time with my clients, or when I give talks, if desired, I might talk about the evolution of terms just because, not for memorization's sake, because it helps people understand gender better, to understand why terms have been abandoned. And the reason there are so many terms is because there are so many identities. And people are willing to stand up and say, you know, these options you have given me, they do not align with who I am. And so people begin to come up with words or use words, create words that resonate with who they are. And therefore, we have multiple terms for identities. It makes sense. So, what can you do? Well, the first thing is when I'm talking about a particular person, and if it's relevant to bring up their gender identity, which is something I do encourage to examine if you're going to talk about it, if it's relevant, then I use the terms they use for themselves if I know what that is. So if I hear somebody use terms that they use that to identify themselves, then I will use those terms for them. If I don't know a term somebody uses for themselves, and you've probably heard me say, I often use terms like transgender people, non-binary people, and as a huge umbrella term for all identities, I use gender diversity. And the third thing about this is I'm willing to be wrong. I'm willing to recognize that some people will not resonate with those terms, that there's a subset of people that may not like those terms. And I'm willing to hear that. I'm willing to be corrected. And so what happens when I'm corrected is I say, thank you. Because yes, my initial reaction is to feel bad. Oh, I'm not going to lie. I feel it too. And then I remind myself it's a great learning opportunity. They cared enough to tell me that it was bothering them. They cared enough to correct me. And so I take that opportunity and I thank them for it. Thank you. I apologize. What what term would you like me to use? And I leave it at that. And I use the term they tell me. And if they're really upset, I let them be upset. I don't try to convince them to be upset, not to be upset. I don't try to convince them that I'm supportive. Again, it's not easy. It doesn't feel good. And here's what I think. The more love and understanding we can bring, that is support. Allowing people to have their feelings and be upset, that is the most supportive thing you can do. So continue to engender love and have a great week.